Most of us know that the stock market has returned bumper profits over the last 2 years, but is that going to be sustained in 2025? Today, we take a look all the way back into the 1920s to check every single bull record and see whether we can continue up. Also, markets have hit some big dark pool liquidity. Yes, it looks like Wall Street has made a couple of large transactions ahead of and after Apple's big result. So in today's video, we'll break that all down along with some of our favorites, including gold and silver going absolute ballistic, a new market that people are looking at, and whether Ethereum has just made a huge move post a monstrous trade. Today, we're covering stocks, commodities, and cryptos. Let's get into it. Well, welcome back everybody to The Daily Show. My name's Tom, and in today's video, we have the latest data and of course the key levels that you need to be watching in the markets right now. But let's kick things off with valuations because things are getting really wild when it comes to what Wall Street is claiming things are worth. Take a look at this. Even in the advent of DeepSeek's new revelations, according to SoftBank and OpenAI themselves, they believe that they're worth another $40 billion, bringing their total valuation up to $340 billion. I'm really interested to know whether you guys think that's absolute delusion or is it worth this much? Let us know in the comments down below. So let's talk a little bit about Apple's earnings. Basically, they weren't that great, were they? We saw only 0.3% growth over the last 3 years in terms of actual revenue, 123.9 to 124.3 billion. And iPhone sales were down year on year. But what I found most interesting are two things. Of course, Apple is taking advantage of its core audience due to saturation. Services are the backbone, and that's what's actually been improving, the revenue from services in the back. But also, as soon as Tim Cook mentioned that iPhone 16 sales are stronger in countries with Apple AI, the stock went from being down to shooting up around 3%. It just shows that as soon as you mention AI still, markets are prepared to go, you know what? Yeah, it's totally worth more. I think it's a bit of a warning sign though for valuations because really Apple doesn't seem to be growing the same way it once does, yet people are still treating it like it's the gold standard. Speaking of gold standards, this has been a run for the ages. Take a look here when we track all the way back to the 1920s and have a look at each and every bull run. Now, we've already discussed this with different charts throughout the last 6 to 9 months. And of course, we remain bullish at this stage in these markets, and we'll talk about why later on. But have a look at how this is now in the top decile. Basically, we are seeing one of the best bull runs ever recorded, and it's happening right now. Now, does that tend to continue? Well, most of the time you tend to see up, down, and all around kind of markets in the third year. And we've already mentioned that 2025 is going to be quite wild. If you haven't already told that from January alone, then I don't know what you've been doing on the markets, but we're all aware that this year is going to be quite crazy. So if you're interested in following along with that, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because we'll be sharing some of the biggest dark pools. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest keys as well to this year. If we continue to see dark pools all at these highs, and then we get a Wyckoff distribution, you better watch out for down below. Now let's talk about the macro and of course what's been going on in terms of the rate cut and how the market is currently reacting. You can see here the average not followed by a recession. So usually the market would continue to go up. The kind of 7 years of normal averages and the one that goes with the recession. Now we're not quite out of the gates yet. We're not following what I would usually say is a normal market structure for a recession coming through sometime later on, maybe in the next 9 months. But generally speaking, it's important to watch market structure. This is something we will be tracking throughout all of 2025. And for now, things seem to be following, as we've already said, the non-recessionary path. Now let's take a look at what's happened over the dark pool liquidity trade. So these are some of the biggest trades from Wall Street that, of course, we track here daily, and we share with you guys the ones that tend to matter. We already know that Nvidia looked like it was getting a little bit of a bounce with huge amounts of dark pools right at the lows, but we also see a bunch of bears sold out of their positions. And of course, that has helped the overall semiconductors market. We first reported on that one yesterday, but we saw so many more just the days before that. Now we've got some interesting ones though. The number one largest trade we have ever seen in the last 2 years on BULZ. Now, you might say, what is that? Well, it's the FANG and Innovation 3x Leverage Fund, and it's coming in right where you would expect maybe a nasty bear to sit. Now, it could be a buy, but of course, we did see some large transactions into a sell recently, so we've got to be very, very open to both cases here. The last time we saw trades quite like this was the beginning of the end in 2022 for this fund. So it's something to keep an eye on. We haven't, of course, seen price action to go along with that, but we certainly must be watching. So this one here, certainly worthwhile paying attention to. We'll cover that again in the next video to see whether we've got any updates to price action and what exactly is going on. No time to panic just yet. Let's now go over to Ethereum. Now, things were looking excellent here in the previous session. We talked about how that 3K low looked like it was getting across the board buying from some of the biggest on the street. And so far, it's regained a little bit. We'll look at the chart later on today's video so you guys can see how good it does look. But there are some exciting things there if the market continues to find a rally at these levels. Now let's talk about volume control. So this one here is from Seth Golden, and basically it shows you here that overall we've seen across the board kind of a decoupling, or the VIX getting kind of crushed across the board. So the VIX dropped from 20 on January 10th to sub 15 this past Friday. For each 5-point drop in the VIX vol targeting funds are forced to leverage longs. So basically what this tends to do is, of course, it ends up usually with a bullish statistic over the next, more importantly, generally 6 months. And I think that's important to note, because if we take 6 months from the time of this date, then of course we're in the next couple of quarters and we're in July. So at this point, that is going to be a very important time in the market. Somewhere around July into that August, September period, we tend to see usually markets pull back. That's that seasonal weakness that we get. So we'll be watching this one very closely. But I think if you're looking at the structure of markets right now, it's going to be very difficult to be too bearish from what we're currently seeing. A lot of the stats are pointing towards that analog of bullishness. You can see here soft landing analogs. We're still following the trajectory of everything is all green, all good. How about January? Are we going to end January over 2%? Well, as of the time of this recording, it seems likely, but of course we still have 1 day to go. So let's find out how Friday ends up trading, and we'll report back on our special weekend video. Let's now talk about the good news stories. And the good news stories are, of course, our favorite asset classes, and the one that we've been really long on for the last 18 months, gold. New all-time high. Pretty cool stuff, guys. Well done. Gold continues to be really strong, and silver also broke out to the upside over the last 24 hours. And you might say, well, is it over yet? Well, from a multi-month perspective, it really doesn't look like it's over yet, and it looks like gold could continue up throughout the year. Remember, a weak dollar will be very strong from gold, and we did just see, and we reported on this in the last couple of videos, that we have got 100% stat here with minimal reads, of course, but hedge funds dropped their positions. So hedge funds ran out of steam on gold, and that's usually a great sign that gold's going to break out, and boom, a few days later, of course, it has started to rally. Another one that's looking very interesting is, of course, the China ETF. Good news out of DeepSeek has kind of got everyone going for the Chinese New Year, and people are wanting to invest again in some of the cheaper tech companies. And when I say cheaper, just valuation-wise. So we saw record outflows. That tends to be a dipping point and, of course, a turn in the markets. And we've seen record shorts, which, of course, may be the story next week when we see Chinese markets open and potentially we have squeezes on our hands. Some other news that I think is worthwhile keeping in the back of your mind, if you're looking at things like these large transactions all happening near these highs, we also know that Warren Buffett is reducing position. Now, I asked you guys yesterday, what do you think about this? And the overwhelming answers were really one of two. One was, have you checked his age, man? He's cashing out. And the other one is, he knows something most people don't, and he doesn't try to time the market, but he generally tries to obviously, make these positions inside of when he thinks it's overpriced. And I tend to agree with that one. Basically, I believe Warren is sticking to his rules, and I still think that he's cashing in because he thinks basically the stock market is expensive. Now, is he still buying certain stocks? Of course. Is he still going to hold certain stocks? Of course he does. But usually when he's done this, and the last time he really did it heavily was like '05. So of course he was really early there. You got to remember 2005 is pretty early for the 2007-8 sell. But yeah, he sticks to his guns, and I think he's doing so here again. So thank you very much for those comments down below, guys, and also the thumbs up in our recent videos. Very much appreciated. So in terms of Friday, Exxon's probably the big one here, and Chevron. We'll see how they go. And we've got the core PCE news coming out at 8:30 a.m. New York time. What about the chain? What's going on in terms of overall flows into crypto? Well, it probably comes as no surprise, even though this is a little bit outdated compared to that dark pool, that both Bitcoin and Ethereum were up. And I expect these to be better, specifically Ethereum. I'm going to guess there's a decent amount of volume once we get the next day. So when we get the 30th of Jan, I'm thinking there's a bit of volume there. Let's check it out in our next video. Talking about S&P 500, how did the day break down? Well, it kind of sold, and then it rallied back up. 60.50, and you can see a lot of wicks around here, all finding buyers. Now, that's not bad news. I mean, if we scroll this down into a 5-minute chart, you'll notice right near the end, and the close is often the key, is one of the statements we say. We've obviously say patience, react, don't predict. If it's in the press, it's in the price. And of course, the close is the key. This is pretty important. We saw massive transactions coming right into the close, and that's not necessarily unusual, but it did rally the market up. Now, it will be important what happens here because, of course, 6,100 is a massive call wall. Let's take a look now at the futures market action. Again, really good signs here of a significant kind of buying pressure through these wicks. But if bears do push underneath these prices, specifically under 6K, we may even see a new low. So 6K, I think, is going to be a very heavily needed to be defended zone. And the reason we'll explain that is because we'll look at these options. And what you'll notice is 6,000 comes up pretty strongly on both the 31st, which is right there, and also next week on the 3rd of February. So you'll notice here that that is the put wall. So really, most people are seeming to line up around 6K with their options puts. And if the market does push underneath those, then it could create what we call a cascade effect. In this case, markets are really still trying to stay ahead, and you'll notice we're in positive gamma for the Friday trade. Basically, we have got a lot of calls above. And if I was guessing, I mean, if the market really wants to push higher, then it could get quite carried away on Friday and push, really high. But yeah, maybe they'll make some money from this. So they'll get it down and kind of try to close it around that 60-50-ish area. If it does keep pushing higher though, and we get through 6,100 plus, then that's going to open up that 6,200 we've been discussing. And all chances are that sometime this year we will hit another all-time high, because of course we've shared that has a massive 7% chance statistic based on previous history. Let's now talk about a couple of other positions. Of course, there is Nvidia. It fell during the session, then rallied near the end of the day. We've still got the 125s and 130s being the blockers on calls. We get through 130, that is going to be the real bull sign to say, you know what, stuff you bears, we're going higher. We don't care about DeepSeek, it's all good. So 130 plus is something to watch next week for sure. And when it comes to the Tesla trades, it's up, down, and all around. I mean, basically Tesla is stuck. We've got an earnings result that was subpar. We've got a bright vision, I guess, from Elon. If you haven't watched the call, if you're interested, I guess I'd go check it out because there were some pretty wild ideas coming through. And we still kind of maintain that 380 is the base support. If we lose 380, we're probably going to hit around 330 and 340 prices. Now let's jump into the charts. What about the bonds market and options? Well, they were spiking up a little bit. So certainly a little bit more cause for concern than the last couple of sessions. I wouldn't say this is something I usually would trade off, but anyway, thought I'd let you know. And of course, KRE, XLF, home builders, etc. Let's have a look at home builders again. They're all relatively okay. So basically, it doesn't look like the market is feeling sick. You can also see here consumer discretionary versus staples continues its bullish run, which basically tells us that people are taking on debt. They're feeling generally fairly positive, and yields have remained flat. So the one that you want to watch with yields is going to be the 10-year. And if it drops let's say 4.45, so we'll just set an alert here for 4.47, then that could be a good catalyst towards a few things. Number one, I think it's going to be a pretty good catalyst for China because we've talked about the dollar being lower. Obviously, 10-year going down could push the dollar through, but it also could be a good catalyst for a few other markets, potentially also gold and some of our other favorites. Now let's take a look at the US dollar. It's hovering around the exact basically supply zone here. We're not down at that 106. We continue to watch the dollar very closely. Most data stats say that the dollar will trend down now over the next coming months. But again, if you have a differing opinion, let us know in the comments down below. All-time highs, guys. Gold, yes. Well done. I give you everyone a clap. Well done, guys. You have smashed it once again. So it's fantastic to see gold doing this. Maybe I would have preferred it does a little bit more sideways action before breaking a new high. Usually that means it's going to be stronger. But maybe gold's on its next move, 29.50. Obviously, there'll be trials and tribulations through that. But in general, this is a pretty strong break, especially if it can hold for the weekly close. So we'll check that one out in the weekend. Another good sign is silver. I had a suspicion this was breaking yesterday. We did share it in our private community, links in the description down below if you want to join that and check it out. And I was pretty positive on silver last 24 hours. It looked really good. And yeah, it's broken through here, 31.41. And that, of course, puts the daily close above 31, which in general is a pretty good sign. We've broken downward trend lines and we continue to look strong. Now, could this be the final time that we actually move towards those numbers that silver bugs like, the 40, the 45s? Hey, it could be. We'll see. But this is certainly interesting. I think a lot of people are going to have some targets at 32 in terms of the scalpers and day traders. US oil, no updates, still a series of lower lows and lower highs, so we'll update when that changes. And really no updates on Tesla, 380 and 450 on the top, and obviously we're looking at 330 potentially in the future. What about Intel? Well, Intel also had its earnings, and yeah, they're probably a bit crappy. I mean, they beat on the fourth quarter, but then they warned of the first quarter. Look, Intel's actually not bad from a technical level here. You might hate the stock. People have been absolutely shredded in this thing, but it does have some principles of turnaround. So this is another one that, yeah, it's a risky position, but it's kind of like, recently when we've been talking about AMD, they're risky positions, but the risk reward is starting to play out a little bit better on those particular ones. What about Nvidia? It took the low. It actually ended up rallying back up here with a nice wick. So you can see here the nice wick. And that's a bullish hammer, 2 wicks that have held. We'll need to get through 130 to really define this bottom, but I think there is clearly purchasing here. This is not small volume, big volume, couple of dark pools, looks all right. Now let's move over to a sector I'm liking at the moment, which is healthcare. Looks good still. I think this one could be a bit of a sleeper hit this year. That's obviously a multi-month. And you can see here as well in China, things are heating up as the market continues to find buyers, whether it's Barber, which I'm now allowing to be going up. And why I say allowing is because remember, I've hated XRP and I've hated Barber. I changed my mind on XRP about a month and a half ago. And then obviously it's rallied since then. And I think Barber is also one of those ones that, yeah, I'm not the biggest fave of this stock, but it does look like it's rallying. So I mentioned this to our private community a few days ago that I think it's probably okay now to see it strengthen up. And this is all part of the CCP's kind of plan to make sure that they get some good press as well, I think, for the market. It's amazing what sentiment can do. US 2K, what do you guys reckon about this one? It looks okay, nice, decent daily close, obviously above the 2 dojis here, or the 3 dojis, not above that one though. This looks pretty good to me. I think that we have found a base on the US 2K, and there are some exciting opportunities inside of that one. If we move over to the NASDAQ, you guys know that this one has been pretty strong. We've almost filled the gap. We've got a resistance probably somewhere around this gap area, which is 21.7. And this is going to be really a story of if the market is able to break through more 6,100 on the US stock market, the S&P, then probably everything will probably rise around that. Obviously, there are starting to get some real questions on some of these valuations though. And let's move over now to one of our favorites, which is Ethereum. And why I say it's our favorites is just because I enjoyed the dark pool yesterday and I enjoyed the rally. I enjoyed the daily close. I thought it was pretty strong. And we're still now testing this trend line. So we're going to look for this to be broken. Obviously, that 34.50 is what we've been really watching. But this coupled with what we're seeing in the crypto market, what we're seeing in Bitcoin, it could be okay. So yeah, I think there's a little bit of positivity here in Ethereum, even though it's been a shocker for a little while. And that's because these transactions down here, they are supportive of a broadening base. And this is going to be good if we can get through the trend line. So one to watch, obviously we'll be looking for flows, and Bitcoin doesn't exactly look shocking. It's still considered, it's still basically just doing this pullback in time here just before highs. That's never a bad sign for stocks or for cryptos or for commodities. If the market now bounces and breaks above 107, I think we're going to an all-time high. But what do you guys think in the comments down below? Let us know. Big news is really just now the core PCE for Friday, which is at 8:30 a.m. New York time. And if you enjoyed today's video, then please remember to subscribe and smash that like button. Follow us on X, guys. If you're in Perth or Brisbane, come out to our free events in February. They're going to be absolutely phenomenal. We'll be having a great time together and sharing some really helpful information. So make sure to get to those if you can. And yeah, we'll see you in the next video on the weekend. Thank you so much. Bye for now.